Hello everyone, welcome to this Facebook live question and answer session. That was a very long-winded way of saying I'm here, if possible, if at all possible, to answer any questions or comments you've got specifically about next week's big royal meeting at Ascot. Now, we're going to start off with a few that we've got in already, general points, but please, anything specific, I will do my best to answer it as best I can. And between us, hopefully for the next hour or so, we'll fly by and dot some I's and cross some T's as far as Royal Ascot's concerned. Now, we start with some pretty straightforward ones. Naps, next bests, each ways and lays. So I'll have a go answering those for you, at least from my perspective, and then we might have some more specific questions which we can dig into. But comment underneath and we'll do our best to get us through as many as we can. First one then. Nap of the week, that's the question, and the answer is 2 words, Crystal Ocean. He runs in the Hardwick Stakes. He's about 2 to 1 now as things stand, but the fact is that 2 to 1 seems a good price to me about a horse who is essentially a Group 1 horse in a Group 2 race. This has been a target ever since he finished second in last year's St. Ledger. Everything that could have gone right has gone right. Tightened the screws at Sandown, then was really impressive, pretty much poetry in motion at Newbury. For him as a stepping stone to some of the elite Group 1s, and you look at the make and shape of the field against him, and it looks like an inferior set of opponents. So he's about 2 to 1 now. I'd be surprised if he wasn't shorter, much shorter, come the Saturday when the final field is in and when people get around to seeing just what a potential Group 1 horse this is. So the simple answer is nothing flashy, nothing to do with flair, but Crystal Ocean in the Hardwick on Saturday. That's my idea of the nap of the meeting. Next best we've got, I don't know, I kind of like Stradivarius in the Gold Cup. The more I think about this potential matchup between him and Order of St. George, the more I'm coming around to Stradivarius. Think back to last year when Big Orange outpointed Order of St. George in the finish. Now, whether you think Order of St. George was set too much to do, or whether you think Order of St. George is a bit flaky in terms of temperament, there are certain questions that Order of St. George has been asked that he hasn't come up with an answer for. He's got an aura of invincibility around him, understandable from the early part of his career, but the fact with him is that in his last 12 races he's been defeated as much as he's won. Now obviously that has included 2 renewals of the Arc, which in theory he couldn't have won, and he's run really well to finish 3rd in those. But just from my point of view, Stradivarius has got exactly the sort of skill set that would worry Order of St. George. We're dealing with an up-and-coming 4-year-old against tried and tested, if not primed and past it, 6-year-old in Order of St. George. So I really am getting the hots for Stradivarius in the Gold Cup more and more as I look at the race and I just sort of work through Order of St. George and the various chinks in his armour that have appeared in the last couple of seasons. Each way selection, I think the Invincible Army, I've written something today, an A to Z, generally looking at as much ground as I could cover for Royal Ascot, done it in A to Z form, and the eye of the A to Z belongs to Invincible Army, very much the case being that he's pretty much bomb-proof as far as the Commonwealth Cup goes. We've got an unexposed dark horse in Equilateral, we've got a sexy O'Brien horse in Sioux Nation. We've got Sons of Marley, who of course beat Invincible Army last time, but Invincible Army has got the perfect blend for what I think you're looking for in a Commonwealth Cup horse. He's got the standard, the speed, and a bit of steel running through him. Only once in his life has he been out the first 2, and he's got that track form. He was really impressive at Ascot, the only time he's been there in the Pavilion Stakes. And I just think that at the prices, he's about 6 to 1. I don't think you can kick him out the first 3, and I think there's probably a higher chance than 6 to 1 would express that this fella can see them all off in the Commonwealth Cup. That's next Friday. We've got one question about a potential lay of the meeting. Now obviously lay, in theory you're saying that horse can't win, but obviously it is in the framework of prices. And I'm looking at Fairyland in the Albany Stakes for a filly who's 5 to 2. She's not even top of the shop in terms of fillies with Timeform ratings. She had a certain advantages when she won last time and beat the boys. It was one of those where you think, ooh, she's 2 from 2, she's trained by O'Brien, and she beat the colts last time. But she was getting weight. I think there's several of those colts failed to fire against her. And just at the prices, 5 to 2 seems skinny to me about a horse who isn't ahead of the pack in any way, about a race where we're going to have Wesley Ward contenders come over, and about a race in the Albany where we've got naturally unexposed fillies who are only now starting to reveal themselves. So Fairyland, just at the prices for me, that seems the wrong price. I had a good look at the market this afternoon, and that was the one that stuck out to me as a potentially vulnerable favourite, given that the form doesn't quite match up with the position that she's in as favourite. So they're the sort of overarching primary questions to do with betting. Of course it is, that's why we're all here to talk about this, and that's hopefully a big part of the enjoyment next week, to put our money where our mouths are and have a crack at the betting market. So the nap for me is Crystal Ocean. Next best, I do like Stradivarius in the Gold Cup. Each way, Invincible Army looks sure to be thereabouts in the Commonwealth Cup. And there's a lay, Fairyland in the Albany. I just think that she's the wrong price. Not necessarily lay, but a price that doesn't really reflect her true chance. I've got some questions coming in. Why is the Queen Anne run on the straight course, and why is the St James's Palace Stakes run on the round course? I don't know for sure, but it's to do with tradition. In that the Queen Anne has always been a straight mile. I think they did change the St James's Palace from the straight to the round. I don't know what the reasoning was, but it certainly helps in terms of different dimensions, because it's a very different test running hard on the straight mile at Ascot. It is more the province of the older horses who are more used to running, who are more football, more developed. And you can see that it wouldn't really bother them as much as it might do for the 3-year-olds who are still up and coming. It does play in tactically to the individual races, so I don't know what the answer is, but I do think it's a good question, one that I should research a bit more. But it definitely does play into the different markets and the different dimensions of those races. Personally, I like the round course more than the straight course, because you can get straight course races and horses who just aren't suited to that hard running over that Ascot 8 furlongs, where it's largely against the collar as well. On the round course, it brings tactics a bit more into it, it brings pace and jockeyship a bit more into it, and I think that all feeds in. I'd much rather watch races on any round course than on the straight course, because it's just a bit more intuitive and there's just a bit more going on at various stages. One other question: will a Frankel offspring win at Ascot? Obviously, Royal Ascot was the D-Day for Frankel. For many people who think about Frankel, they'll think of the 2,000 guineas, they'll think of York, but in terms of Timeform, with our ratings hat on, the single best performance that we've ever rated a horse with achieving was Frankel in the Queen Anne, 147 from that demolition job on the straight track here at Royal Ascot. Will any of his offspring win? Brings us to perhaps the most famous of Frankel's sons amongst his second generation. I'm talking about Without Parole, who 3 from 3 so far, didn't impress everyone, and certainly gave me a few shocks and shudders when he scrambled to the Heron at Sandown last time out, but John Gosling was very clear after that the ground was pretty taxing, that the horse had missed work. Don't forget that he was half thinking, certainly intending in his mind, to perhaps throw his colt into the guineas on just his third start, but they had to bypass that because of a small setback. He did his job at the Sandown in the Heron Stakes, and I think that he's probably going to learn and jump up an awful lot from there. So Sandown and Without Parole was one of those where you look microscopically at the brushstroke and you think, well, that's not very impressive, but you take a step back and another step back and you see the bigger picture of an unbeaten horse with a brilliant pedigree, trained by a master. And obviously Without Parole is a big time form horse, in the sense that what he did on his second race at Yarmouth was exceptional. To run to such a high time figure on just your second start in such a low-key race as that Yarmouth novice event was, the John Kemp 4x4 stakes at Yarmouth. Without Parole, he's got all the numbers to say that he is a Group 1 horse. Now he's going to get the chance to prove it. And I would just say, coming back to the question of, there aren't many Frankels that I've seen with that almost exact makeup of the ability to sustain top speed and that big, strong, powerful stride. Those two in motion, that's what set Frankel apart when he was racing, and that's what I think that he's inherited above all without parole from the big boy himself. That sense that he can get into top speed and then sustain it for longer than other horses. That's why I was able to run such a big time figure at Yarmouth, and that's something we didn't see necessarily at Sandown, but with excuses. And I think that Ascot we might well see without parole, the real without parole, and I do think he is the real deal. Can Batash win? Pip Myatt. Thanks for getting involved, Pip Myatt. Can Batash win? Absolutely, absolutely. Batash can win. What price is he to win? I think he's around about joint favourite with Lady already. This is the big head-to-head of the whole meeting, not just the first day, but I think of all week, because we're dealing in two of the fastest horses that we've seen for a long time. Lady Aurelia was brilliant at the Royal Meeting the last 2 years, in the Queen Mary and in the King's Stand last year when she just narrowly missed out on a track record. But Batash has got some serious speed himself, and it's very unusual to get two sprinters who can win by wide margins, as both Batash and Lady Aurelia have done. I think that we are dealing in a two-horse race. These two have got far superior form and speed clocked compared to anything else that's going up against them. Batash is a little bit in the mind, as you'll all know, in the sense that we had this match-up last year at York where Batash, he almost ran his race beforehand. He didn't have his mind on the job, and that meant it didn't deliver this big head-to-head that we're all expecting. And in the end, with Lady Aurelia, when Frankie Dettori realised that Batash was struggling, he put his foot down on the accelerator to win the race, perhaps a bit too soon given how Marcia mugged him late on. It is, for me, perhaps the race of the week. I would say that because I just love how it's racing stripped down into who's the fastest out of horse A and horse B. You've got Ascot, the perfect stage, over 5 furlongs at which to decide it. Batash was unimpressive as much as a winner under a penalty can be impressive in a sprint. Scrambled home with a temple on his reappearance, but it's worth remembering that that was much better than Lady Aurelia's first start of this season, where she was in a low-key race, was odds on and was overturned. Obviously that's just a means to an end. But I think that Batash can do things that even Lady Aurelia can't in terms of A, speed, and B, sustaining that speed. And I'm sort of hoping that Batash can see off Lady Aurelia, because I want him to be proved right in terms of being this exceptional British sprinter, the like of which we haven't seen for a long time before. David Michael Sheridan, I don't know whether in conversation with others, but the general chat is about Cracksman. I can see that, David. Yeah, Cracksman. This horse spiked in price, didn't he, after he was all out to catch Salouen at Epsom. A couple of things come to light. One that we could very much see during the race, in that he had a lot of ground to make up against an enterprisingly ridden Salouen, and the way that the races were playing at Epsom that Friday under the gluey conditions, first over at the stand rail, it very much meant that Cracksman had a much stiffer task than we all anticipated, because the nature of the race and the nuances of the race, and because Sylvester de Sousa was on fire and gave Salouen the perfect ride for Epsom up until perhaps that last point where he didn't quite grab the stand rail. So it brings us to the question of, is Cracksman still worth that huge figure? 136 Timeform has got him rated. That makes him equally the best horse in the world right now. That comes from this course and distance. Ascot 10 furlongs that he tackled in last year's Champion Stakes, and he beat, amongst others, Poet's Word by a wide margin. I still think that Cracksman's in there. I still think we're going to see that here, because it wasn't just what happened on the track at Epsom in the final part of the race, it was what happened at the start. And John Gosden has expressed, Frankie Dettori relayed, and Racing UK has largely showed us that yes, the horse did preempt the start, did bang his head, and that seemed to knock him off that usual Cracksman rolling stride that we saw. So the bottom line is that the figure we've got on Cracksman, it makes him £10 and upwards clear of the opposition. That in theory makes him an odds-on shot for the Prince of Wales, and I really hope that we do get to see that Cracksman. I think we probably will, certainly more so than the Cracksman we've seen either in France or Epsom this year. France, it was just a case of doing what he had to. Epsom, it was much more a case of the circumstances that impacted and influenced him, which meant that he could never, it was impossible for him to run to that huge figure. So he's a really exciting horse for the second day on the Wednesday. Could you put me off, this is off Chris Ellens, could you put me off Equilateral in the Commonwealth? I hear he ran to a monster rating at Doncaster last time. Really interesting horse, Chris, isn't he? Because he's had just 4 races in his life, never been near a listed race or a group race before. And yet here he is pushing favouritism in the Commonwealth Cup. He hasn't run a monster rating in terms of what he did at Doncaster, nor a monster time. But how often or how rarely do you see horses win sprints like he did? Any sprint, not just a handicap, but any sprint at all. Maiden, Seller, Claimer, or a novice stakes like he did. He had a penalty, he won by 8 lengths, he never seemed to be flat out, and a lot of this, Chris, to do with his rating is to do with the second, because that day he beat a horse called Foxtrot Lady of Andrew Balding's. Now, Foxtrot Lady, even though at that point he hadn't won a race, she'd never put a foot wrong in her life, she barely ran below 80, and yet he's handed her a backside, so to speak, and a £40 beating on Timeform terms. Since then, Foxtrot Lady has won not once, but twice, and every time she's come to the track, she's been almost an advert by proxy of Equilateral's talent, reflecting great glory on him that he could hand out such a beating, such a savage beating to her as he did at Doncaster. So it tells us that even though his profile means he's not really prepared for a Group 1 race at the Commonwealth Cup, joining some significant dots means that he could potentially be the best horse out of them in terms of achievement already. And obviously after just 4 races, we're only really scratching the surface of his ability in a race where we've got Sioux Nation, Invincible Army, Sons of Marley. I mentioned Invincible Army before, but we've got 3 hardened but pretty much exposed horses who've had a lot of opportunity to run big in big races. So he's a new kid on the sprinting block. It's real conundrum as to what you go for, but you would say that the prices now, that boat has pretty much sailed as far as any new angle in with Equilateral. The onus is now on him to go and prove it, but in many ways he's the darkest horse and the most exciting horse outside of the 2-year-olds running at Royal Ascot. So I'm really interested with him. I couldn't back him now at the prices he is, because he's playing a very different game here. And don't forget his 2-year-old record either. Brilliant win, then blobbed. He had excuse, but again, it's just in the back of your mind, will history repeat itself? Brilliant comeback win. What's going to happen now? He's in far deeper waters than ever before. Carl Rollison, thoughts on Without Parole? Well, I've given you some of them, but I'm really convinced that Without Parole is going to turn up. We mentioned him in conjunction with one of the original questions. Will a Frankel offspring win at Ascot? I can't think off the top of my head every single Frankel that's around, but the one big Frankel that's out there is Without Parole. And I think that, yeah, I think he can win that St James's Palace. It's also Without Parole in that it's not just what he's done and the promise of 3 runs unbeaten where he took the clock apart at Yarmouth. It's also this idea that perhaps the Guineas isn't an up-to-standard Guineas. And I'm not just talking about the Newmarket version, which is run obviously by Saxon Warrior, who plotted a different path when to Epsom. We had Massar finishing 3rd there, who obviously improved for the 1.5-mile trip at Epsom. It's just this idea that is really the Guineas the be-all and end-all in terms of the form. Irish Guineas, romanised, something like that. Ken Condon's big outsider who came to swallow up US Navy flag and the rest. And then the French equivalent as well. We had Olmedo win it well. He didn't seem to stay in the French Derby. When he went back there, he could come over. But it's just this idea that the Guineas in each of the individual countries, England, Ireland and France, it might not be a vintage Guineas, it might not be a vintage crop of 3-year-old milers, and it might be the perfect climate for Without Parole to unpack all that improvement. So really interesting there about Without Parole. I'm going on Wednesday, says Keith Jenner. What's your tip for the day? Wednesday we have got the Prince of Wales, which is obviously Cracksman. Can't give that as a tip of the day. What else have we got on the Wednesday? We've got the Queen Mary, haven't we? Shades of Blue I'd go for on the Queen Mary. We'll talk a little bit more about 2-year-olds if you want to get in touch. But Shades of Blue, this is one of those horses who turned up, won at Ascot, and you thought, well, that's a good horse. And Clive Cox said immediately after, right, I'm going to wrap her up and send her towards the Queen Mary. But what's happened since then, she's been made to look like a very good horse, because the second was Queen of Bermuda, who's won twice since. The third was Come On Leicester, who's won impressively since. And it just means the Shades of Blue, she looked good on the day, but she looks really good in light of what others have done for that form. Clive Cox won the race last year with Heartache. Shades of Blue's already better than Heartache was going into that race last year. And this is one of those races where, yeah, we're going to have a Wesley Ward horse come over. Chelsea Cloisters, that's the one the dogs are barking for. He's won the Queen Mary 3 times, and this is the one that's going to draw most attention. But Shades of Blue, from a form perspective, would be my suggestion for a bet on the Wednesday. I think it might be the first race on the Wednesday, because they've moved the Jersey to the last race. So that might be an issue. Stephen Bond asks, what's your best each way shout for the Wednesday? I mentioned moving races on Wednesday. The Jersey used to be the first race on the Wednesday. That's now the last race. And the Jersey is one of those odd races where you get that mix of horses who aren't quite Group 1 standard, who aren't quite milers, who aren't quite sprinters. And it's that middle ground for a lot of horses who are sort of wandering round aimlessly and need to go for something at Royal Ascot, so it is the best fit. But I would say that is the perfect climate to throw in something from left field who potentially could spring forward whilst all the rest are looking to find or refine their stride. And Owen Burrows has got a horse called Tabdool, I think it is. It's a Hamdan horse. It's Owen Burrows. It's 2 from 2. It's definitely got a T and a B and a D and an L and an O in it. So it's about Tabdool or Talbood or something like that. But won at Leicester, beat Yafta, who many people will have seen that one's development this year for Richard Hannon, running in big handicaps off top weight, now 114. And then its reappearance, it really strung out a field at Nottingham over 6 furlongs. And after that it got entries in the July Cup and the Commonwealth Cup. But it's bred to be a 7 furlong horse. It's so strong in the finish that you'd think it's a 7 furlong horse. At this point in time, the Jersey makes good sense for the Owen Burrows unbeaten 2 from 2 contender. So he's one of those horses who, he's got a higher rating you normally find for a horse who's 2 from 2 or beaten an unbeaten one. And the Jersey, it's a good race for me to have a crack at, because those at the top of the market tend to be there by reputation as much as anything. And a horse like Tabdool, Tablood, or Tabdool, whichever one you call it, I'm really sorry about that, but I'll try and look up. Owen Burrows, unbeaten, 2 from 2. That's a really interesting each way play for me in the Jersey. Paul Stevenson, what's your treble for the week? Crystal Ocean, definitely the middle leg, if you've got a middle leg of a treble, I don't know if you can. Stradivarius, I like that. Stay with us, because I'll think of another one at a slightly more juicy price for the third. Chris Ellams is back, thanks. Chris Ellams, Sergei Prokofiev or Calix in the Coventry. Would you be surprised if the winner came from outside these two? Not entirely surprised, Chris, because Legends of was a horse he's sort of an amalgamation of Calix and Sergei Prokofiev, in that he blew us all the way first time out like Calix did, but he's had a bit more time to prep for this like Sergei Prokofiev has. It smells like a really good Coventry this year, in the sense that Sergei Prokofiev has identified himself probably in January or February as the Ballydoyle Bullet for the Coventry. That's why he was out on April 11th in the same race that Caravaggio started on his way to Coventry Glory at Royal Ascot. He's had 2 runs since then to hone his skill for that Scat Daddy to come out, and everything has gone smoothly for him as far as preparation toward the Coventry goes. It's just unlucky for him that John Gosden has unleashed 2 potential monsters in the past 3 or 4 weeks. Legends of War at Yarmouth, who was a big breeze-up purchase and who was really good in the closing stages there, really fast in the last 3 furlongs, and Calix as you mentioned, as most people have saw, is really hot property right now in terms of a son of Kingman who did something similar to what Kingman did on his debut, i.e. run to a ridiculously big figure. Kingman went and sustained it, and the thinking is that Calix is going to be certainly a Group 1 horse himself, but it's just those time pressures involved. So, yeah, because there's so much heat around Sergei Prokofiev and Calix, and in answer to your question, Chris, it's sort of interesting to me that Legends of War has gone a little bit back in the shadows, but he was big news. He cost 900 grand at the Craven Breeze Ups. He's with a master trainer, he's a scat daddy, so he's a horse who is really interesting for the Coventry in the sense that it's not just a 2-horse race, and a good question because that's the sort of general fostered feeling that we're dealing in a 2-horse race, 2-pronged attack for the Coventry, but Legends of War, like I said, he's sort of midway between the two of them, and he could easily spring up the Qatar race. Jamie, just had a bit of a tip for Downdraft, Joseph O'Brien, what's your thoughts? Keith Jenner, thanks Keith. Now, I've got a million horses in my head. I've got this one bit of paper to try and remember everything. But I think the Downdraft is a 2-year-old of Joseph O'Brien's. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, get back up to us, Keith. Is it the one that's had 3 runs and won last time and is, I think, in the Norfolk? Because that is an interesting horse. He put the blinkers on, didn't he, second time, and woke him up, and then he ran to a figure in the high 90s on his 3rd start. And sometimes with Joseph O'Brien, we've seen this before in that 2 runs or a series of runs aren't really a forewarning or a heralding of what's to come. And I've noticed myself, if it's the horse we're dealing in, we're both talking about the same page, that I looked down the list for the betting in the Norfolk, maybe the Windsor Castle, and he was a shorter price than I expected, and I thought, well, I know that horse, that's the horse who's been beaten twice, but it turns out he won really well last time. So Keith Jenner, if that's the horse, we're on the same page, get back in touch. Matthew Pearce, can Cracksman be beat? Surely not. Yeah, I'm with you, Matthew. It's alright to say, can he be beaten? Is he the one to beat? The sort of language that's around racing means that you can stop short of putting a figure on it, putting a number on it, and saying, well, to what extent is he going to be beatable or unbeatable? And I would say that even money means that he wins this race 5 times out of 10. And the more I look at the field, and the more I stand back and appreciate Cracksman for the body of work and not just his performances this year, I'm thinking, yeah, of course he'd win this race 5 times out of 10. If you allow that 1 or 2 times, the random nature of racing is not going to be at its best. The random nature of racing and the not machines, things are going to go wrong. Run of the race, tactics, but level playing field. Cracksman is by far and away the best of these. And you just got to trust in John Gosden, haven't you? Because if John Gosden has him firing on all cylinders, then from everything we know about every horse in the race, and it's not like a 2-year-old race or even a 3-year-old race where we're dealing in unknown quantities or lesser known quantities. All the evidence is in for the St James's Palace, for the Prince of Wales, and Cracksman looks to me like even money shot rather than 2 to 1. So that would be my immediate reaction. Norman and David are chatting. Sorry, Crystal Ocean, I mentioned that at the top, didn't I? Nap of the week. Hardwick Stakes on the Saturday. Or keep some powder dry for that, or play up your winnings on that. But again, he's one of those where he's 2 to 1 now, and it's more, it's Royal Ascot. It's sort of 4 to 1 the field for most races. So you immediately look at that and think, well, that's a short price. But when you think of the opposition, it's probably going to consist of Idaho. It was clearly a sort of second-rate Ballydoyle horse. And the upgraders, those horses who were chancing their arm in a Group 2. I think this is a really clear case of Crystal Ocean being a Group 1 horse in a Group 2 race, and therefore that makes 2 to 1 to me a juicy price. I'm just flicking through in case there's any more. Peter Box Rooney, hello. I'm going to York tomorrow, I think. Barry Smith. Imperial State, 3:30 York, day 1. Is that tomorrow? I haven't had a look at that, but I will have a look at that. Main Desire. Tony Halls. Hey Tony. Main Desire surely has a great chance in the Commonwealth. Oh, that's main. Oh, sorry. The cogs suddenly turned there. This is the Michael Bell horse, isn't it? Who won the Queen Mary prep last year, then got injured, missed the rest of the season, and then came back with a bang at York again at the same meeting. Surprised the life out of me that she could run as well as that. And the betting, I think, told us that she wasn't considered to be 100% going into that York. That's unfair, 100%. Not considered to be 100% fit is a better way of putting it, I think. So, yeah, the Commonwealth Cup has been dominated. There's different horses have taken it in turns to dominate the headlines for the Commonwealth Cup. We had Sioux Nation, of course, because it was Aidan O'Brien and because it won the trial, so to speak, over in Ireland. We then had Sands of Mali beating Invincible Army. So in terms of the preeminent British trial, then the sort of headline switch to that. We've got Equilateral, who we talked a lot about. He's now the sexy one for the Commonwealth Cup, and all the time, Main Desire for Michael Bell is going under the radar. So I'll have to check what price that is. But you've sort of just reminded me there, triggered a memory about that, and yeah, I think that's good thinking. Regards, just because one of the reasons why this is a good time to talk about Royal Ascot is that the agenda changes and the horses and the headline acts change in terms of the meat of the debate about each race. And you guys, talking already, like me, have just naturally focused in on the headline acts, the main events, in terms of the races and the horses involved. But it's really good, isn't it, to take a step back and just to think about other horses who aren't being talked about as much, who aren't so prominent in the betting. And that's a really good example, I think, Main Desire in the Commonwealth Cup. So thanks for triggering that memory, and thanks for switching the conversation, just shifting it ever so slightly, to think about those horses who aren't in the top 2 or 3 in the betting. Ben Henry, hello Ben. Wesley Ward to have a good week, what do you reckon? Well, it's Ascot, 6 2-year-old races. History tells us that he'll win 1, maybe 2, because it's such a good operation and it's such an important meeting to Wes Ward. And from probably last year, and never mind this year, the yearlings who have become juveniles have been trained. It's almost like boot camp, isn't it? The Wes Ward stable over there. And they have the private trials. Then they all go to Keeneland for these 4.5 furlong races to see who's best on the track. And in reference to your point, Ben, fillies is the byword for the Wes Ward horses. His juveniles this year, in that he's won the Windsor Castle, he's won the Norfolk, but it seems and it feels like the real power with Wes Ward's juvenile juggernaut he's bringing this year lies with the fillies. That's because he's got Chelsea Cloisters, who is being talked about as the next Acapulco, the next Lady Aurelia in the Queen Mary. And I think it says a lot about her that he's scattering other fillies to take on the boys in various races. So that's Shang, Shang, Shang for the Norfolk, and that's Our Passion for the Windsor Castle. I think the fact that he's running those fillies against the boys, it tells you something about them, but I think for me it tells you even more about Chelsea Cloisters, in the sense that they aren't considered to be a match for her. They're almost paving the way for her. So David Johnson, our flat editor and 2-year-old handicapper, has written something on the website about just a general sort of précis about the 2-year-olds, and there's a good stat in there that he's dished out. The Wes Ward, the Royal Ascot races for 2-year-olds are over 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs and 7 furlongs, 1 7 furlong race to Chesham. When it comes to 6 furlongs versus 5 furlongs, Wes Ward, as you might imagine, does much better over 5 furlongs. That entails the Norfolk, the Queen Mary and the Windsor Castle. Those are the three races he's targeting with fillies. Our Passion for the Windsor Castle, Chelsea Cloisters. Oh, thanks Keith, I'm coming to that next. Chelsea Cloisters for the Queen Mary, and Shang for the Norfolk. History tells us he's going to have a good week. Chelsea Cloisters sounds like it is the one for him. But again, back to that conundrum of, you know Wes Ward has a good weeks, bookies know Wes Ward has a good weeks, and that means that all of his prices are shaped. They're sort of slightly artificial in that the myth around them means that you're never going to get a big price above that. Keith's back on. Downdraft is the same horse we were talking about. Thanks, Keith. Taking odds of 33. Won at Navan 10 furlong last time. Thanks, Keith. I'm still not convinced that me and you are on the same page, but it's all my fault. Kevin Smith, what's the best bet for next Wednesday? Cracksman, if you don't mind betting a short price. Shades of Blue, if you want a bit bigger price. Mentioned Wes Ward, but try to make that point there that the Wes Ward horses, in terms of pricing them up, and bookmakers, very little value in them, is there? Because it's almost a projection of the price and their ability rather than the actual representing the facts. And I mentioned that horse in the jersey, Tab Dool. That seems to me a pretty juicy price. Matthew Pease is back re-entering the King's Stand debate, that big speedball showdown. Do you think Batash can give £3 to Lady Aurelia? Aurelia was really impressive last year. It's really important that £3 is going to make a huge difference, and you think, well, it's neither here nor there over 5 furlongs when they're going to be covering in 57 seconds or something. But it is you get the impression that there's fine margins with these two, and that £3 could make a big difference. And on the same subject, it's not just about the weights carried and the way the race and the flat out sprint. Who blinks first? Who is going to make the move first? Which one is going to attack? Which one is going to try and pounce? All these things are going to really plug into the debate, and that's why I really like it. I think personally that he can give Lady Aurelia £3 because Batash was sensational probably 3 times last year. Sandown, Goodwood, and in the Abbey. Think back to the Abbey. If you open your mind and close your eyes, everyone at home, and picture the Prix de l'Abbey, what you'll see is horses sprinting past what we think is the winning post, when in actual fact we've got another 100 yards to run. And the other thing is about 8 horses within about a length, because it's such a congested finish. Batash won by 4 last year, going away. It's just so unusual to see a horse win a Group 1 sprint like he did, like Lady Aurelia did in this last year, and that's what sets them apart. Kamal Pritish Tahula, that's terrible pronunciation. I just want to know about the horse weights. In some countries, such as Hong Kong, Australia, the horse weight is mentioned on a race card, but never seen it mentioned on any UK data. Do you know where I can get the data? Without horse weight, I can't do the analysis. Really important entry into an overall debate, Kamal, in that we in Britain like to see ourselves as the forerunners of world racing. Yeah, we're the ones who invented it, we're the ones who host it best, we're the ones with all the best bloodstock. Not the case at all. We see time and again the international flavour of racing. Australians coming up for the sprints. Aidan O'Brien from Ireland winning 27 Group 1s right across the world. American horses like Justify we saw compete the Triple Crown. Wes Ward's 2-year-olds. So the point I'm making is that Britain isn't the be-all and end-all. In fact, in several respects, Britain lags behind, and that is one of the key things is data. Britain racecourses don't return sectional times as a matter of course. There are some that do it, but this will be unheard of, I'm sure, to you, Kamal, and to most people who analyse racing in Australia, in Hong Kong, in America for sure. And the other thing we don't do on Britain is carry the weight of the horse. Now, Kamal's not referring to the weight carried in terms of 8 stone 6 on the horse's back, the weight the jockey has to carry, the actual weight of the horse. And again, it was like wind-ups, it's like tongue ties, it's like cheek pieces. We didn't have that information once upon a time, and it was thought that, well, the public's got enough information, they don't need any more. Well, we can decide what information we need, we can decide what onus or importance we put on the information, but this is one area where we haven't got that data. And it's interesting how you, Kamal, said that you can't possibly analyse races without knowing the sheer weight of the horse. Well, that's not recorded at all in Britain. There are some trainers who do weigh their own horses and are happy to tell you about the changes from race to race, but there are other trainers who think that it doesn't really matter and they'd rather go on instinct or intuition about when a horse is ready. So thanks for entering the debate, Kamal. But the sad answer is that no, you won't find that information anywhere because it's not published or it's not available. It is a piece of data within racing that is not considered to be worthy enough to put on a race card to publish anywhere or for the trainers to have to tell you. Now, Norbert Carmenzuli. Norbert, welcome. Takes us into a new race, thanks for that. Queen Anne, first race, first day, Tuesday. Recolletes for the Queen Anne. Yeah, I've come around to this horse just today, looking at the field. Lockinge was a bit of a wishy-washy race, wasn't it? Rhododendron won that from Lightning Spear. Rhododendron might well sweep all before her in the mile scene this year, but when you think of the Lockinge, think of the short margin between them, think of the general standard going in. It wasn't a race or a performance by the winner that suggested that that horse was going to dominate the division. And again, it's about being insular, isn't it? It's about thinking that the winner can only come from Britain or Ireland. But that's not the case at all. The French rarely leave Royal Ascot Week without a winner, and this fella's really interesting. Recolletes, because mentioned the joint best performance by any horse last year, according to Timeform, in the world was Cracksman in the Champion Stakes. That's why he is such a hot favourite, and that's why I'm still convinced that he should be even money or thereabouts for the Prince of Wales Stakes. In the jet wash behind him that day were Highland Reel, one of the best and most substantial horses of recent times. Subsequently won the Hong Kong Vase or Hong Kong Cup, not sure which one. Close up in the Breeders' Cup. Port's Word, second in the Dubai Shima Classic, won the Brigadier Gerard the other night. And the idea is that proper Group 1 horses in behind, and in that mix was Recolletes. 2 runners this year, both, won them both, hasn't he? Won them both by convincing margins as well, sort of only length and a half. But that's pretty good in France, given the general nature of those races of steady and then spurt. And it's hard to put distances between yourself and the pack at the end of those races. And I just think that they are thinking differently with this horse, in that if you'd have asked the trainer last year, what sort of horse is this? You'd say, well, Recolletes is a 1.25 mile horse. But the more he progressed, the more he showed speed. And I think he's sort of being reinvented as a miler this year. Winning the Group 1 was over 9 last time. But I think this is a really interesting horse in that he's right behind the principals on Timeform ratings, and there's that sense that he's on the way up, whereas other horses have either plateaued or perhaps even just dimming in terms of their powers. So this isn't a Queen Anne where we've got a headline act or a standout performer, and for that reason I think it's good to look a little further afield, whether it's in terms of France. We've got America is firing Yoshida in there for Bill Mott. But I do like this horse more so, Recolletes, in the Queen Anne. David Ladd, welcome David. What chance do you give Mirage Dancer in the Wolferton? I've always had him down as a bit nuts, that Mirage Dancer, but I think he's calmed down. One of the original questions is, will a Frankel offspring win at Ascot? This fella sort of put... He had all the ingredients to become a Group 2 horse or a Group 3 horse, but he never quite mixed them together. But there was definitely signs last time, wasn't there, that he was growing up, that he was fitting the pieces together, and that he was going to realise that initial potential and that initial hope that Sir Michael Stout had for him. Wolferton this year is different. First year, it's not a handicap. Normally, it's a listed handicap, and therefore it equalises the horse's chances. This year, they've done away with the handicapping element. It's just pure and simple a listed race. So ratings really count here, and it should be a simple matter of the higher the rating, the better your chance. I don't know for sure his rating in relation to the rest, but it's a good horse to bring up in the sense that he seems to be getting his act together at just the right time with Ascot around the corner. Bob Gordon, welcome Bob, bringing in another line into the Coventry. We had that discussion earlier. Is the Coventry a two-horse race, Sergei Prokofiev and Kalix? I suggested not, because we've got Legends of War, who's a bit like an amalgamation of them both. But Bob's come in with Cosmic Law in the Coventry. Easy to underestimate that Woodcote form. He won the Woodcote at Epsom by 6 lengths because you thought, well, my impression was not every horse has handled the Epsom track, not every horse has handled the softish ground, and because of those circumstances it perhaps exaggerated the winning distance. So I did think at the time, and there's still a bit of me thinks now, that Cosmic Law will do well to reproduce that performance given the different variables in play with the opposition, the track, and probably the ground as well. But it is interesting for highlighting that 5 of the top 10 two-year-old colts trained in Britain are trained in the North, and it's easy to underestimate that the North is at full voice thanks to Mark Johnston, Kevin Ryan, Richard Fahey, Keith Dalglish, David O'Mara, John Quinn. There was a lot of trainers in the North who trained Royal Ascot winners. Personally, I'm a bit against Cosmic Law because of the feeling that he's laid everything out at Epsom, and those who saved a bit for Royal Ascot might be able to surpass that standard, but it was a good standard. Paul Stevenson, welcome Paul. Again, introduced a new race, which is great. Last 10 minutes or so keep them coming in quick. I'll hurry up with my answers. You fire in with your questions, then we'll have a roundup at the end. Oh, before we move on to Paul Stevenson, thanks to Keith, who tells us the downdraft is part of the Queen's Bars team, and tells us that the horse is Tab D, Tabdeed. That's the one that I've been struggling to pick out of the crowd in my mind for the jersey. Tabdeed, Owen Burrows. Thanks for that, Keith. Right, Paul introduced a new race, which is great. Ribblesdale, your thoughts, Jamie? I like Wild Illusion. Wild Illusion, the Oaks runner-up. Everyone was a bit downbeat on the Oaks afterwards because Forever Together, not Together Forever, I don't know which way it goes. She was a maiden going into it, wasn't she? Wild Illusion was second clear of the rest. I wouldn't put you off Wild Illusion at all because we've got a filly who's running 2 classics and who certainly brings the best form. But Royal Ascot, and in particular the Royal Ascot races for the Epsom horses, can be difficult for the 3-year-old in the sense that Wild Illusions ran eyeballs out not once but twice, and now she's going to be asked to do it again. And this is a race which could see the reappearance of La Tidar for John Gosden, who was the Oaks favourite and had to miss that. And even more interesting, even more intriguing is this Sun Maiden. That's the Sir Michael Stout filly who's by Frankel out of midday, and who absolutely watered the track at Salisbury, and it made you think, well, that is something unusual. And when you've got a blue-blooded pedigree like she has, then the sky really is the limit. And I like the way that Stout has bypassed the Oaks. It would have been tempting to put that filly into Epsom, given how good she looked at Salisbury. But Sir Michael Stout has decided to wait with her a little bit longer to buy this time, and that usually pays off for the Ribblesdale. So it's a really interesting line in with that filly in particular. The approach to Royal Ascot for the horse who contest the Derby and Oaks, they can leave the race behind. History's got a few lines in with that into how it can be a difficult approach. Some Maiden and La Tidar might both benefit. I think they will both benefit from having sat out Epsom. Jimmy Bradley, thanks for bringing in another new race, the Coronation Stakes, Group 1 for fillies on the Friday. It was the Friday for years, I hope it still is. And this is supposed to be the decider for the best 3-year-old miler amongst the fillies in Europe, because in theory you should bring together the winners of the Newmarket 1,000 guineas, the Irish 1,000 guineas, and the French 1,000 guineas. And you fancy the French 1,000 guineas winner Tepal, considering that that was just, what, the third start of her career, and that it was a reappearance. She did really well, didn't she, to win in France. And David Simcock is a master trainer, really good at pressing the button when the patience has sort of been finished. I'm just furiously clicking here. My cohort is going to helpfully get rid of the screen so I can see that, even if it is just moving. So yeah, Tepal. I think that the French guineas was probably as good as the Irish guineas won by Alpha Centauri, or the Newmarket guineas, the guineas, English guineas won by Billiston Brook. Billiston Brook will have to be supplemented, but she surely will, given the money she won at Newmarket and the fact that there's nothing really come out to surpass what she did that day. But obviously, Clemmy is the most fascinating horse for sure in the Coronation, given that she was 6-4 for the Guineas before a setback. She was 8-1 for the Irish Guineas when she did come back, which told you immediately that she wasn't really considered to be on her game. There were other Irish Aidan O'Brien horses who were short priced than her, who had no right to be on form, and it was just a means to an end. Clemmy's about 9-2 now. It's an impossible horse to price up, but I'm the sort of person and the sort of punter who would rather take a chance on Clemmy at 9-2 and swallow my medicine if she's not quite right, because she certainly was head and shoulders the best of her generation last year. You've got to trust that Aidan O'Brien is going to have her right or ripe or more ripe for this Coronation Stakes. And I would urge you to go back and have a look at the Irish 1,000 guineas won by Alpha Centauri, because there is a stage between 3 out and 2 out where Clemmy makes a good move down the outside and then can't sustain it. We think she can't sustain it because of the fitness angle and because of the fact that that wasn't the be-all and end-all for her. It was just a screw tightener, it was a maintenance race. So Clemmy, when you think of what price she was for the 1,000 guineas over the winter, you'd have thought that something must have gone horribly wrong for her to be 5-1 for the Coronation. It hasn't quite gone horribly wrong in terms of plans, yes it has, but in terms of her own physical makeup, we hope not. And she's the sort of filly who could easily be much shorter price if the boys step in. Chris is back. Have we talked much about Harry Angel? How much was you reading it was Ascot form? That's a really good point to make, Chris. And Matthew's up next, and then Jamie's going to come in before we get under the wire. I wouldn't make too much about Harry Angel. 0 from 4 at Ascot. Now obviously we're not going to ignore it completely, but I think that's factored into his price, in that we've got a horse who, despite the runners from Australia, Redkirk Warrior, Ireland via Australia, Merchant Navy, in America with the Wesley Ward 3-year-old, 4-year-old bound for nowhere, Harry Angel is the best of them. You can demonstrably say that's the best sprinter in there. Now, it's easy to look at that Ascot record and say 0 from 4. But is it better to look at that Ascot record and say runner-up 3 times from 4? Second to Caravaggio, and Caravaggio was thought to be unbeatable. Second on his reappearance behind Blue Point when it was his reappearance. And second on his debut at Ascot. So I don't think that it's an Ascot factor. I think that the last time we saw him at Ascot was the champion sprint, when there was a sense that he fluffed his lines, but it was the end of the season, it was softer ground, and there's just the feeling is that you can only keep those sprinters on the ball for so long, and that he just didn't fire rather than to do with the track. So that's a really good point to make, in that the headline act for the Diamond Jubilee is Harry Angel. The headline news for Harry Angel is 0 from 4 Ascot, but I'll be willing and happy to overlook at that and focus on his pace and his power that make him the Timeform top rated in there, and means that he's very much the one to be. Look, there is a theory that Ascot should suit him well, the configuration of the track and the fact that there was just a thought at York that he might well be settling down a little bit more. He just needs an arm around the shoulder and say, relax a bit, you're a brilliant horse, don't need to be so keen to get on with things early. Thoughts on the Gold Cup, says Matthew. mentioned at the top that the more I look at the Gold Cup, the more I'm getting the hots for Stradivarius. Order of St George has got certain fault lines. We know that from his record. Stradivarius has got the exact skill set that could expose and exploit those fault lines in him. Jamie Fahy, welcome Jamie. Top 2 bets as a double for the week. I'd throw in Stradivarius along with Crystal Ocean. That would be my double for the week. Stradivarius in the Gold Cup, Crystal Ocean on the Saturday in the Hardwick. They carry almost identical colours, those horses. Stradivarius is the black, Crystal Ocean is the navy blue. There's no reason for doubling them up. It was just an interesting aside. What else have we got in the last few minutes or so? Thanks for this. It's been a really good hour in terms of you opening my eyes as much as me trying to tell you anything, in the sense of the horses and the angles in, because that's a big thing, isn't it? The angles in. So, rounding up, let's revisit the very first question just in case anyone missed it, because it is the only thing that anyone wants to know. Sum up for the week. Nap of the week, Crystal Ocean, 2-1 for the Hardwick. That'll go off 11 to 8, and I'm pretty sure it'll win. You should be pretty sure it'll win if you think it'll go off 11 to 8. Stradivarius in the Gold Cup as the value play to topple Order of St George. I think it's a big thing that Stradivarius has got all the momentum with him. Invincible Army for those who just want a solid, robust bet that will give you a shout, that's about 6-1 and that's 1 to do each way. Invincible Army in the Commonwealth Cup, and I think that's a really good illustration of one of the threads that's come up in terms of focusing in the wrong direction sometimes at Royal Ascot, and just the recency bias of going whatever happens in latest in our minds, whatever freshest in our minds. But he's got the speed, the rating, robustness, track record to think that you can't kick Invincible Army out the frame in the Commonwealth Cup on the Friday. Stradivarius ground, Joel counteracts. No, I don't think the ground's an issue with Stradivarius. It wasn't soft when he won the Queen's Vase last year, was it? I don't think so. Matthew Pearce, under the wire, DXB King Edward, for the same reasons as Wild Illusion, why I wouldn't back either DXB or Wild Illusion in their respective races, King Edward the 7th or the Ribblesdale. Just the Epsom factor. Horses who go through the mill in either the Derby or the Oaks, it's a huge ask for them to come out in that quick time frame with the pressures of everything involved and produce it all again in time for that. So I think that's our hour up. Thanks everyone for joining in. There'll be lots of stuff going on timeform.com over the weekend and certainly into next week, when we'll be having daily previews, including myself on Tuesday looking at Wednesday. Well, stay tuned to timeform.com for everything that will get you on the front foot for Royal Ascot.